Arigato, minasan, konnichiwa. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Japan America Society of Georgia and the Consulate General of Japan's U.S. Japan Now Innovation and Sustainability in Agriculture webinar. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I am the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Georgia, and so thrilled that you are all joining us today as we learn innovation and implementation of sustainability initiatives will be the keys to resolving new challenges and opportunities in maintaining food security, keeping up with growing demand, and protecting the environment. So we'll have a very special and unique talk on environmental issues we face and how one Japanese company is developing technology and sustainability to impact our future. But without further ado, I would like to introduce the chair of the Japan American Society of Georgia, Mr. Al Hodge, for some opening remarks. Al-san, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Japan American Society of Georgia, we welcome you all. You are in for a treat with today's expert panelists. Georgia has long been involved in what used to be called conservation, and environment and sustainability is very, very important to us. And in fact, if I recall correctly, Dr. Eugene Odom of the University of Georgia coined the term ecology and was a true pioneer in many of the aspects of environmental protection and sustainability. And it is wonderful that the University System of Georgia continues with the research and development through the Georgia Research Alliance, and of course, great universities like Emory that will be featured today. Additionally, the University of Georgia, of course, was the United States' first land-grant university. So it and Fort Valley State University and HBCU, which for our Japanese friends that may be watching from Japan, that's historically Black college and university. We have great higher education that's doing research and development and training and educating the next generation. We also are happy that we have some private colleges. Berry College in Rome, Georgia is known for being the world's largest campus, and that affords it the opportunity to also offer large animal pre-veterinary medicine. And it is known for students that are well above 90% graduation rate that get, or rather acceptance rate into veterinary medicine universities around the world. Therefore, we have a lot of great education and interest, good public policy that is always being improved. And we're also very happy that we have great private sector support. And certainly Kubota is one of those great corporate citizens, and we'll share more about what that means and how that is actually implemented through the course of the years with what Kubota is doing. Georgia, by the way, yesterday announced a $700 million expansion by Danimer Corporation, and they make packaging, and the product that they'll be making in this case is a partnership with Mars that bring us Skittles. And this 700 million, 400 employees, good jobs company is going to be making compostable packaging for Skittles and other products that will be used in other uses. Therefore, a lot of good activity is taking place, and I can't let this conclude without noting that a former governor of Georgia, Sonny Perdue, who is a doctor of veterinary medicine by his education, went on to become the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. He just concluded his term, January 20th, and he continues to make a difference in Georgia, and by all means, his interest in the environment, agriculture, and of course, in his case, especially animals, is also continuing to make a difference in the living legacy that he is important to us. He and The Japanese ambassador to the United States made a joint appearance and provided remarks, substantive remarks, of course, at the Southeast U.S. Japan Association conference September a year ago. And so with all of that, I will return control to our wonderful exec for the Japan America Society of Georgia, Yoshi Domoto.
Great. Thank you so much, Al. And from that sweet talk about Skittles and new packaging, we'll kind of go into sweet talk about academia and then also manufacturing and how they're both supporting the environment. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce our two guest panelists. First, Dr. Eri Saikawa is the Associate Professor and Director of Graduate Studies of the Department of Environmental Sciences at Emory University in Atlanta. She has a BE from the University of Tokyo, MPA from Indiana University, and also a PhD from Princeton University. So a lot of experience in her studies and research. And at Emory, she conducts interdisciplinary research on the environment and a whole lot of different projects as well. So we'll have a talk from her here in a minute, but we will first ask Mr. Phil Sutton to give an introduction about Kubota Manufacturing of America. Mr. Phil is the Chief Administrative Officer, or the CAO, for Kubota Manufacturing of America in Gainesville, and also Kubota Industrial Equipment Corporation in Jefferson, Georgia. So Kubota is one of the largest Japanese companies here in our state, and we certainly appreciate all of the support it offers and provides not only to the Japan America Society, but to various communities throughout the state of Georgia, the Southeast, and beyond. So without further ado, Mr. Phil, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Thank you, Yoshi, and thank you to those of you who are joining us. Just a little bit about Kubota, for those of you who may not know. Kubota was founded in 1890. We think of Kubota as our beautiful orange tractors and agricultural equipment, but Kubota got its foundings a very different way. So our founder in 1890 started a casting company, and as a casting company, his goal, Ganshiro Kubota's goal, was to make ductile iron pipe to take potable water to the villages and the countryside in Japan that was suffering from poor drinking water conditions and poor environmental conditions, open sewage conditions, and problems like that led to cholera and other dangerous diseases. So Mr. Kubota made his life's work in really to create a safe water drinking system throughout Japan. And interestingly enough, we're still in the pipe business today. In fact, I just held a seminar the other day with many local business or local municipalities, introducing Kubota's innovative, what is called HRDP, or hazard resistant ductile iron pipe, which is widely used in Kubota in Asia, especially in earthquake prone areas. It's widely used now in Los Angeles and up the entire West Coast in those areas to make sure that we provide sustainable, safe drinking water in those hazardous areas. And now, especially in critical infrastructure areas, we're introducing that as well. So that's a part of Kubota you may not know about. Kubota's over the years has been involved in really three major areas: food, water, and the environment. So those are our three business sectors today, and agricultural equipment and construction equipment related to food and infrastructure. The water, of course, the water pipe, which gave us our beginnings. And then, of course, the environmental side, which we're involved in water treatment, wastewater treatment, and environmental systems for large municipalities and businesses. In fact, we use Kubota membrane in our own business to treat our own water system so that we discharge less water and we reuse our own water. And so we're users of water and not consumers of water. And so Kubota is that's the three pieces of Kubota again, I know you know about our orange tractors and utility vehicles, but those areas are a very, very important part of us. And that's our underpinnings and our foundation of our business. And that's why our motto is, and our mission statement is, for Earth for Life, Kubota. And so we really take that very seriously. And so Kubota is very heavily involved in sustainability. So a little background, how did Kubota become so large in the United States? As a matter of fact, today, Kubota North America entities are responsible for over 33% in the largest independent segment of our revenue stream. And in fact, North America is responsible for 50% of the profits of Kubota worldwide. So how did we get so big in the years that we've been here? Well, it started out in the late 1960s when Kubota first introduced its tractors to the U.S. market, agricultural market. And interestingly enough, when we started putting those tractors next to local tractors, we considered our tractors to be paddy farm tractors. Well, if you know anything about paddy farm tractors, you know that if they leak oil or if they leak water or any grease or anything like that into the rice paddies, it will destroy the entire crop. So Kubota prides itself on having tractors that don't leak into the environment, and whether it's fuel or oil or anything like that. So when the farmers in the U.S. saw these tractors that sitting side by side, although it wasn't important to them from a dry land farming, it has become important to them. Kubota is one of the world leaders in producing Tier 4 and Tier 5 emissions compliant engines, and we're usually the first to the market with those. So we're very, very proud of that, and that's what really got us our start. So as we grew in the United States in the late 80s, 1988, we started manufacturing here. And today our idea is that our theme is local production for local consumption. Well, how does that affect the environment? Well, if we produce locally, we reduce our dependence on transporting by ship and by ocean. And so we can reduce the impact of that transit by making the products that are consumed here, making them here. And so we also pride ourselves in making sure that we have the most environmentally friendly manufacturing processes. Today we operate, we started out in 1988 with 38 employees and 60,000 square feet. Today we have about 2.5 million square feet and 3,000 employees operating 11 assembly lines. And we are very proud to be part of the sustainability effort of Kubota worldwide. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but as this event continues, but to say the least, we are for Earth for Life. We are Kubota, and that's what has helped us to grow. And sustainability is a part of that. And without sustainability, we can't see the growth that we're seeing today. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Phil. And yeah, look forward to our panel discussion where we'll talk more about your sustainability activities and your innovation and technology that you're putting into use as well. So, but at this time, we'd like to ask Dr. Eri Saikawa Sensei, to come on to talk about her research in environmental health, and understand she has a presentation to show. So, Saikawa Sensei, どうぞよろしくお願いします。
Great, thank you very much. So, is everybody seeing the slides okay? Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I wanted to mention a little bit of the resilience and sustainability collaboratory that we are starting. I am the newly appointed Director of Science, Policy, and Community Engaged Research at Emory University. And I think that's quite related to what we're going to talk about. So if you heard me talk last time, I apologize. It's going to be a little bit of a repeat, but I just wanted to briefly introduce what we are trying to do. So I'm laying out the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that many of you might have heard of. So these are the Sustainable Development Goals that are supposed to be achieved by 2030. And as you see here, there are 17 of them. And I would like to think of those 17 goals in 4 different buckets. So here on the left bottom, I'm having healthy human and social systems. I think for agriculture, zero hunger, good health and well-being, as well as sustainable cities and communities are very relevant. On this technology and infrastructure development side, Phil has mentioned a lot about clean water and sanitation. So that's obviously very important for agriculture as well. And I think industry, innovation, and infrastructure is something that's very much related to what we're talking about today. And of course, decent work and economic growth touches on that too. At the top, healthy natural systems, climate action is very much related to agriculture, as well as life on land. At the center is partnerships. So we really need to work together if we want to achieve sustainability. So what we're trying to do at Emory is to really bring academia, government, corporate partners, and also the communities together to work on this very big goal of achieving sustainability and resilience. Just because I'm a professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences, I just wanted to make sure we are on the same page by putting the 3 most important greenhouse gases on this figure. So as you might be very well aware, there is carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And those are the 3 most important greenhouse gases, anthropogenic greenhouse gases, being man-made. And what I'm showing you here is the radiative forcing, which is the difference between what's coming in from the sun and what's leaving from the earth. And these greenhouse gases are trapping the long-wave radiation and making the atmosphere warmer than the pre-industrial times. So you can see how it's being warmed as we have come from 1950 to 2011. So I want you to remember these 3 gases, because what's important is that agriculture contributes to 10% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. So obviously transportation, electricity, industry, all that we think about are very important, but agriculture is also something that we need to think about for climate change. And what I'm showing you on the right-hand side is that all the 3 gases that we talked about are important for agriculture. And I think what we can think about, how we farm, for example, are we going to use cover crops? Are we going to use tillage or no tillage, as you're seeing here on this figure, is important for how much greenhouse gases are going to be coming out. So what we are doing in my lab is to figure out how agricultural practices might affect these 3 greenhouse gases that I've been talking about. And we're choosing maize or corn because that is using the largest amount of fertilizer. The amount of fertilizer and what kind of fertilizer impacts the greenhouse gas emissions that get emitted. So you can see 16.2% globally are used by maize in terms of fertilizer. So we are trying to see if different agricultural techniques can impact the greenhouse gas emissions. I want to point out living mulch here. This is in partnership with the University of Georgia colleagues. UGA is, as mentioned, is a great land-grant university, and I'm so excited that we're able to work with them. So what we're doing is we have a perennial white clover that grows over winter, and we put a strip of land in between to plant corn so that we don't have to use fertilizer. So what we were trying to see if not using fertilizer and using natural fertilizer, such as this annual nitrogen fixing crop, would it be better for climate? So you can see on the top is how the soil looks after about 2-3 years of doing these practices. You can see very vividly that the soil is very different from living mulch, and there is so much more organic carbon in it. But what that means is that we are also seeing much more carbon dioxide emissions coming out from that plot as well. And then when we look at nitrous oxide that we talked about, even though we thought that this might reduce nitrous oxide emissions, we're actually seeing huge peaks. As the clover dies, they are giving more nitrogen to the soil, and then it's really leading to a lot of emissions, unfortunately. So that amount is similar to what we see from the bare soil with a lot of nitrogen fertilizer application. So what I'm trying to say is that climate smart agriculture is not easy, and more innovation is clearly necessary. And I know that Japan and US both use quite high rate of pesticides. And so the new project that we're starting off is to look at the impact of pesticides on greenhouse gases as well. And I think that's something that we should really think about for a more sustainable future in agriculture too. With the rest of time, I want to shift gears a little bit to think about zero hunger and sustainable cities and communities that we talked about in the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you live in Atlanta, you might have heard of what's called Aglanta. So combining agriculture and Atlanta. This is what the city of Atlanta was trying to push to enhance urban agriculture. And you might know that there are so many community gardens in Atlanta now. They say one of the estimates goes that there's 300 community gardens. And you might have realized that because of COVID, a lot of people are also starting to garden, right? And that is all great if you're thinking about creating fresh produce. There has been so many food desert problems in Atlanta. Food desert is if you don't have a car and if you don't have access to fresh produce within a mile of your house. So to mitigate that, this is a very great thing to have urban gardens and urban farms. But the problem is that we found out that there's no regulation to test the soil before you start growing food. And so we started testing for heavy metals and found high lead contamination in the west side of Atlanta. What we found was these slag pieces. Those are the industrial waste, most likely coming from smelting, called slag. And they have been used as fill material for the foundation. And we found mounds of them in the very low income, mostly Black neighborhood of the west side of Atlanta. And now what has become is the Superfund site. So 1087 lots are now included in the Superfund site, and they're being cleaned. What we're trying to say is that if we want to increase urban agriculture, it is so important that we are making sure that it is going to be healthy and safe for everybody. What we found from our research is that people are pretty concerned or very concerned about this potential heavy metal contamination. But when we asked, are you concerned about your garden? They said, no, we're not concerned. And we asked, are you testing? And most of them said, no, they haven't tested. And so clearly, if you are gardening, you do want to make sure that you test the soil before you grow food so that you are gardening in clean soil and eating the fresh produce that is not contaminated. Also, what we found out in this figure is that we are having the median household income as the background color. So you can see Southwest Atlanta is very low median income household region. The bubble size is showing the proportion of children that are tested for blood lead levels. There is no safe levels of lead for children. And the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, uses 5 micrograms per deciliter for blood lead levels as the reference value. All the kids below 2 years old are supposed to be tested for blood lead levels, but we are finding that it's only about 25% of the children that are tested. And in some zip codes like here, 30303, 13% of the children have high blood lead levels than 5 micrograms per deciliter. We definitely need to make sure that children are tested and they are having safe environment because lead exposure affects neurodevelopment. You do not want to expose your children or any children to that kind of environment. So I think we need an innovative way to make urban agriculture really work in Atlanta and everywhere. And that's the case, not just for the US, but I think for Japan as well. And we need remediation and safe ways to grow food. So both in the US and Japan, I think we can do a lot more to make sure that we provide safe and healthy environment especially for children, and agriculture really plays a very large role. So just to finish it off, I think it's so important that we have the environment to continue conversations. I'm so grateful that Yoshi-san is providing this opportunity to be able to talk to you all. And what I'm doing is to also provide a space for anybody to come and join the conversations on climate change. So I invite all of you to come to the webinars that I host. The next week's seminar is actually going to be very relevant for what we just talked about. Professor Behe is from the University of California, Merced, and she works on soil biogeochemistry. So I hope we can continue the collaboration starting today and work on collaborative partnership to solve these very difficult problems together. So I just wanted to finish off. I cannot thank my students enough, but they do all the work. So, and then also without the funding, we cannot do any research. So I wanted to thank all these funding resources. And then this is my website, sorry, this is my email and the Twitter feed. I would love to hear from many of you, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Saikawa Sensei. I know there's so much that we can do to protect the environment and ensure that it's a great thing that people are gardening, but we have to make sure that soil and water too, right, are safe to use. So thank you so much for your presentation. And so Phil, kind of going into our panel discussion, Dr. Saikawa talked about the need for innovation, but there's really some cutting edge technologies being introduced in agriculture. What are some of Kubota's biggest contributions in innovation and technology for farmers and the agricultural industry?
Well, thank you. That was it was really interesting for me to listen to the environmental side from the academia, because I think I see a big partnership here that that we can further as we have this discussion. So it's interesting because I see the innovation that Kubota is working on. Kubota has always been trying to lead the way on things like the tier 4 and tier 5 emissions for diesel engines. And, we're involved in, we directly draw a line to the 17 sustainable development goals related to food with no poverty, zero hunger, water with good health and clean water and sanitation, and with the environment and sustainable cities and communities and affordable and clean energy. So we really embrace those concepts. And a couple of things. One, from a manufacturing standpoint, several years ago, the EU has introduced the RoHS, or the restrictions on hazardous substances. And of those 10 substances, we have voluntarily, even though it's mainly related to the EU, but we voluntarily complied with that worldwide. To, those are things like she mentioned: lead, cadmium, and those kind of hazardous chromium materials. And we make sure that our suppliers are compliant as well when it comes to parts. And so we're very sensitive to that. We've, in many cases, eliminated, in almost every case, eliminated any hazardous waste that is generated from the manufacturing business. We try to use our own Kubota membrane system to recycle and reuse water, so that we're not consuming that, and that the water that we discharge from our processes is actually cleaner than the water that we intake. And so it's really, really important that we lead in those areas from the manufacturing side. And the products that we produce, we're working on, of course, autonomous tractors. Interesting, in Japan, the average age of the farmer is 67 years old. And so the farm community is aging, but in 2015, 58% of the farms in Japan were owned by professional farmers. By 2023, that number is going to be 80%. So it's really important that we provide the tools to those professional farmers to be friendly to the environment, because that environment is where they make their living. And how their 80% of the land use in the farmland in Japan is going to be professional farmers. So we really have an opportunity to capitalize on making sure that we do things in a way that is going to be sustainable for the future when it comes to clean soil for the future. And it's really, really important that we do that. But we also think about technology that allows farmers to think about creating a planting plan, and they use less fuel that way. They think about their ground cover crops that way. They think about the least disturbance of the land with the best production of crop. So professional farmers must be a part of thinking about how they are producing the most per acre of land. So, yeah, I think about some of the other things like, we think about Kubota is involved with drone technology in Japan, where, as you mentioned earlier, Eri, the pesticides, heavy use of pesticides, and that exposes humans to those pesticides. And human application of pesticides means you have to be, you're putting them more into the into the air, and you're putting more down on the ground, and more is blowing away. But when you're using drones, you can use less pesticides, you remove the humans from the pesticide contact, and you get lower to the crops, and you use less pesticide to do that. And less of it is released into the environment. So that's something that Kubota is definitely interested in and is working on. It's pretty neat to see that compared to the way we used to do business. And then, we recently introduced the EV mower. So we're trying to break ground in that area to the technology for electric vehicles in the mowing business. So those are just a couple of the things that we're doing, but from the manufacturing side and the product side.
Bill, you are remarkable and well chosen to be a part of this program to talk about the private sector role, the corporate citizenship that you and Kubota worldwide are doing. You've mentioned, and Dr. Saikawa has mentioned, the United Nations a couple of times. Certainly, our friends in Japan in the Kadenren certainly have embraced new environmental initiatives, and I know that Kubota is a part of that. Dr. Saikawa, I am happy that you're talking about environmental sustainability, and some of it goes back to truly basic science. Now, it's sophisticated as well and wonderfully advanced. Going back, you mentioned Hala University, or the Hala Institute, as one of the funders for your programming. Georgia goes back to the days of its founding, the contemporary founding with the Salzburgers, who are credited with pioneering crop rotation in order to get more effective use of the soil, and of course not use fertilizers that are man-made and so forth. So much of the illustrations that you both have shared are also based on partnerships, which is one of the fundamentals for Japan American Society of Georgia. So thank you, and thanks for allowing me to add some observations to that.
So Saikawa Sensei, so Mr. Phil talked about Kubota's technology innovation, and you've done a tremendous amount of research on environmental health, but things have changed from 1911 to 1950 to now with the climate, but also with technology too. So how has the advancement of technology helped the environment, and then where can it kind of do more help and support the environment a little bit more?
Yeah, so we need a green revolution to be able to provide more food to everybody with fewer resources. And I think there is so much that we are looking for technology. I think what Phil mentioned about precision agriculture is so extremely important as we think about how we can make it more sustainable. And I also think that we need technology to be able to assess soil quality and what kind of water quality, et cetera. And we would also need technology to remediate contaminated soil to make better water quality. And we need more technologies to make climate smart agriculture work. How can we actually sequester carbon, and how are we going to release less emissions so that we can produce food with less environmental impact? So I think technology is so important, and there is so much that I hope academia and corporate partnership can move towards for a better goal. And that's what really excites me. And I'm so excited to hear so much about what he's saying about, aging farmers. They need so many more technologies to work as well. And I think in the US, it might be the opposite. There's so many young farmers getting excited. And so how can we make the technologies used for these people that are interested in farming in a more sustainable way?
Great, thank you. I think there's a lot that both Japanese farmers and American farmers can learn from one another, and Kubota kind of sits kind of in the middle, right, in both markets, and kind of also helping out farmers globally. But Phil, kind of your slogan is "For Earth, for Life," right? So talk about a little bit more about your sustainability. Pick one of your sustainability goals and how it might be different from other companies, and tell us about it, and what were some of the challenges that you have to overcome to kind of implement those sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, so I think the one of the most important areas is how we connect what we do from building agricultural and construction machinery directly to these 17 sustainable, and I got some great ideas from Saikawa Sensei's presentation that I'd like to take back and share, because I think we only talk about 6. And I think that oftentimes in manufacturing in corporate America, we think of these areas as just that, academic and very high level things that don't really, how can we make them apply to us? But Kubota has, and I invite you to look at our global website. You will see the triangle of food, water, and the environment, and how they are intertwined, and they're very, very important part of what we do. So I think at first, sitting back and look at these 17 sustainable developmental goals and picking the ones and understanding which ones that are part of the business, and then somehow communicating that to the entire business community has been a challenge. And I think that's a challenge today. But it's what I'm very, very proud of is, to see, the SDG goals, the little symbol with the 17 color codes, to see those, every one of the senior leadership of the Kubota Corporation wears that proudly on their lapel. And so they're promoting that. I see it when I go down and listen to our supply chain group, and every day they actually have those 17 SDGs shown on their bulletin boards that they see every day, and so it takes a conscious effort to do that, and it's not so easy for people to necessarily to draw those dark lines between what we do every day and those 17 lofty SDGs. But when you really think about them and bring it down to no poverty, zero hunger, it makes a lot of sense, and people can appreciate that.
Great, thank you. We certainly commend all the great work you're doing in sustainability. And I think there's a lot of companies and individuals that can kind of learn from what Kubota is doing. So, but Saikawa says, on to you. You have worked on a variety of projects on air and soil pollution, climate change, atmospheric chemistry, and more and more and so on. But to build a more sustainable world, do you think any particular part of the environment needs to be addressed more than others? I know they're all important, but can you talk a little bit about where it needs the most attention right now?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think kind of going back to the SDGs, I think we're pretty good at thinking goals separately. and how can we tackle each problem so that we would solve that problem. I think what we need to do right now is to see how they are all connected and how can we think about a systematic change that can not just solve one problem, but solve multiple problems. And I think we've also been very good at solving one issue and creating another problem. So I think by looking at more holistically, we will hopefully be able to solve the problems, the source of the problems, and not making additional problems by solving one thing. And so, for example, agricultural residue burning results in huge air pollution and in some parts of the world. And I think that's not something that we really think about, but that is linked to air pollution, soil pollution, and water pollution, and poverty. And so if we're able to think about a problem a bit more differently, we can solve climate change and all these environmental issues. And I think we can be more leading to equitable future. And I think that's what we're really looking for, both in Japan and the US.
Wonderful. So everyone listening in, so we're not going to do any more fireside chat events, right? We're all going to do have a Coke and tea discussions to ensure that we don't have an air pollution to the environment, right? So, but thank you so much, Saikawa Sensei. And Phil, kind of going back to kind of story about Kubota, kind of taking back kind of the holistic approach, as Saikawa Sensei mentioned. But why did you decide to come to Georgia? And then open up manufacturing facilities in Gainesville, Hall County. And has being a manufacturer in Georgia and Gainesville, Hall County helped with your sustainability goals or development of technology and innovation?
Yes. You know, there's a long story to our history here in Kubota, but basically, you know, we introduced the small size compact tractors to the U.S. market where not many existed in the past. They were normal size tractors in Japan for the small paddy fields, but they quite nicely fit into the southeastern size farm, where most of the farms back in those days were privately owned farms, and people were farming maybe between 50 and 100 acres in the small rolling hills of Georgia and this region of the United States. And so we found a home here with that market because there were literally hundreds of farms of that size in this part, where when you started heading toward the plain states, there were much larger farms with much larger equipment. So we kind of got our foothold here, and Georgia just kind of stole our heart. Because they were so gracious and welcoming to Kubota, and you know, the Atlanta airport and the Atlanta business community welcomed us, and not only welcomed us but helped us to grow. And I was sharing with the panelists earlier that, you know, it just felt like home, and we have been growing to be a part of this community. And again, as we grew, what we realized was that, you know, it really made sense with this idea of local production for local consumption. And so as Georgia became more affluent, Georgians, those family farms turned into hobby farms. And so anything from 5 acres to 15 acres, and people, so again, our products fit very nicely in that environment and allowed us to continue.
Well, we appreciate your being in Georgia. And I think Randy Cardozo was the commissioner for the Georgia Department of Economic Development with the original announcement, and a series of commissioners, Craig Lesser and certainly Pat Wilson, all appreciate the number of times you've expanded. Thank you. And Kit Dunlap, former chair of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, being the chamber exec for Gainesville Hall Chamber of Commerce with the Unified Economic Development approach, which is so resourceful, so sensible, and is really the ideal way to do it. That is truly good. And of course, Tim Evans right there at the chamber also serves, we're happy to say, on the Japan American Society of Georgia Board of Directors. We truly appreciate all that you've done. We appreciate the fact that this year, chair of the board of the Gainesville Hall Chamber, another example of excellent corporate citizenship being played out right here with your leadership. Thank you as well for the number of partnerships in the literal sense of the word with suppliers. OTR Wheel Engineering, for instance, is a company that you've embraced and they've embraced you. A great partnership and good growth over time. They're one of many of the various types of suppliers that you have throughout the state. We genuinely appreciate that. And I know that Yoshi has a question for Dr. Saikawa, I think, about manufacturing and going forward on the further examples of sustainability.
Right. So Saikawa was going to say, we talked about what makes Kubota a unique manufacturing company here in Georgia, but also globally too. But what are your thoughts on manufacturing companies as well as other industries? How can they do more to protect the environment? I know Kubota is doing a whole lot to do so with our sustainability initiatives, but how can manufacturing companies and other companies do more? And what about individuals too? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, companies have such big roles in protecting the environment. And one report, I think, was showing that 100 companies are responsible for 90% of greenhouse gas emissions. And so we definitely need companies to take the initiative in reducing these greenhouse gas emissions. And I was so impressed when Phil mentioned about the hazardous substances, how Kubota is dealing with it, and how they're working with suppliers, because that's what really companies can do. They are not just working with themselves, but they can really lead the way to show for their suppliers, and their suppliers can work with their partners. And I think that's the way we should go. So I am so excited to hear that initiative, and I hope that all companies are going to be like Kubota to really lead the way, and they also have financial resources. So that's also very important. Individuals need to do the share, but I think just the individuals, we are not going to get there. So how can we work together to make a better world, and how can companies can lead that role? I think it's very essential.
Well, Doctor, what you're doing at Emory and your worldwide footprint, certainly with the research and development that you're doing, is truly tremendous, noteworthy. And we at the Japan American Society of Georgia are happy that you also studied at Tokyo University. And I know they are doing some great research. It's my understanding that there's a new type of algae, a microorganism that can be used everything from environmentally friendly jet fuel to recyclable plastics. You know, your note earlier, and Phil Sutton's as well, about the research that's going into drone technology, IoT, and I guess now fertigation, fertilizer being used sparingly, and irrigation techniques in order for good equipment to be used on the farms is something that, again, is so incredible. Any observations about your Tokyo University experience?
Yeah, so I am Japanese, so I'm not a US citizen yet. And so I really enjoyed my university college time at the University of Tokyo. It was really a big treasure. So that was when I really got into engineering and how can engineering potentially can solve the world. But then I also realized that the partnership between policymakers and engineering was also essential. So that made me come to the US to learn more about how could engineering be really useful for the society. And I didn't realize that I would be, here in the US still, but here I am, and I'm very excited to be able to work with my colleagues at the University of Tokyo. We are trying to do Emory University of Tokyo partnership, as well as Emory Yonsei and Emory Nanjing, to make the Northeast collaboration with the US to really figure out how can we make a better environment for East Asia. So I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me know all about what Kubota is doing.
I feel like there's a partnership already brewing right now, right? So thank you very much. So along those lines, Mr. Phil, kind of going back to you, I know Kubota, its development of technology, innovation, sustainability initiatives, how has that affected your bottom line as a manufacturing company? And then also, has that affected recruiting new employees or workforce development by any chance?
Yes. So great question, because I think, that goes back to communication. With 3,000 employees, sometimes they wonder why we do things the way we do things. And every single new employee, we actually train every single new employee on their first day about environmental aspects and impacts. And this is one of the areas we give them true manufacturing examples of that. And we think that that is what good corporate stewardship in the environment is. And like I said, we really believe that to sustain our business in this global environment, we have to be a sustainable company, and we have to support this sustainability. And yes, there are investments, but there is a huge return on investment. And when it comes to the idea that you can't necessarily calculate a dollar value, but you have to look at this from a society. And that's one of the things I love about our company is, we think about what our contributions to society are first. Yes, we're a $17 billion company with 41,000 employees worldwide, but you don't get to be on this world stage like this by not taking sustainability serious in 2021.
Great, thank you. I feel like I should call you Sutton Sensei, right? With the training that you do with all your new employees. So, but yeah, maybe you and Saikawa Sensei can teach a course or two as well. But this past year has been a challenge for all of us with COVID-19. So, Saikawa Sensei, can you talk about how COVID-19 and human behavior during the pandemic has affected environmental health?
Yeah, so we all agree, I think, that COVID-19 has impacted us so profoundly. For my research, what we looked at was how did that impact air quality? I think some of you have heard that air quality has gotten better. In some sense, it has, but then for other pollutants like tropospheric ozone, that is not necessarily the case. And I think it has really shown the complexity of air pollution problem. And I think it has, in some aspect, really shed out light to the soil contamination problem, because a lot of people are gardening. And since we are not able to get to them, how can we raise awareness of this issue has been really what we've been working on. So we've tried to do some curriculum on the website and such, but I think it's also very true that it has made us stay at home and learn more things. What can we do to the environment? I hope that we will get through this very soon with the vaccination, so that we are going to be back to in-person events very soon.
Great, thank you. Now, hopefully, what's happened over this past year with the pandemic will, allow all of us, individuals and companies alike, to kind of rethink how we live every day and think about the environment a little bit more. So. But Phil-san, along those lines, how has the pandemic and COVID-19 affected Kubota and its business operations? I know you're dealing with some other supply chain issues right now as well, but can you talk about how Kubota has kind of done throughout this past year?
Yeah, so when COVID first hit us last year, our sales orders were dropped by 40%. We haven't seen that since the Great Depression, 2008, 2009. And we stopped operations for 2 weeks so that we could study quickly and learn how to protect our employees in a COVID environment. And we started back slowly, and we did it safely, and great communication, which was huge necessity. But surprisingly, no one expected our business not only to come back, that 40% of orders that they canceled were back within a few weeks, but we were hiring people and we couldn't hire enough people to fill the orders. And I think there's a couple of factors there. Our products, I mean, people still needed agriculture, they still needed infrastructure, and they still needed parts and services for their tractors to continue to produce, maybe on a greater need. But we saw a lot more people in those hobby farms turned into necessity farms. But seriously, the business just grew and grew and grew, and our orders not only recovered the 40%, but increased as well. So we were finding ourselves in a situation where we were trying to figure out how to deal with that situation. So again, we found ways of doing that. We actually hired about 300 additional people last year, but we did it safely, and we were able to continue to operate safely and smart, and made sure that our employees were safe. With 5 operating locations and 3,000 employees, we had no major outbreaks or anything like that. So we were very fortunate, and we know that what we did to protect our employees first paid off, and it paid off in a big way. And I think that we're still struggling. Of course, the supply chain was totally disrupted, and you saw what could happen with the Suez Canal, with one single ship blocking the Suez Canal. We actually had 33 ships from 12 sitting at the canal and the rest waiting, approaching the canal, that could have been seriously affected or delayed, but we were able to overcome that. So we're fortunate that that's open, but the supply chain right now in the COVID environment is very fragile. And I think that we need to think about this on a long-term perspective, from an environmental perspective, of how, I think one of the things that we did see is the overseas shippers started using larger ships and parking the smaller, less fuel efficient, less effective vessels. I think we're going to see more of that, the larger, more fuel efficient and more efficient transportation of ocean cargo. I think we've learned a lot during this environment with that, and the flexibility that we've been able to see during that. So very interesting time, but we're one of these days we'll have to write a book about it.
I'll definitely be one of the first people to purchase that book and read it too. So yes, be kind of a history looking back. I'm sure it'll be very interesting times to look at. So Saikawa Sensei, I'm going on to you. This will be your last question, if that is okay. But academia, government, and the private sector each have a unique role in protecting the environment, I believe. And but how do you see each group supporting each other for the common good? And I know you do a lot of work with policy making as well. So can you talk a little bit about your work there and how these 3 sectors can support one another?
Yeah, I think we have each different strengths, and sometimes we're looked as ivory tower, but I hope that academia provides something useful to the corporations. And then by working, with the government is essential for example, for something like the Superfund site. And I think the collaborations and then including the community as well is really important. So what we're trying to do at Emory right now with this Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory also includes creating a prototype for anaerobic digester. And I think that's kind of like a very interesting partnership that can bring different stakeholders together. And I'm hoping we can be more open and flexible after COVID to think about creative ways that we can work together for a better future. So thank you so much today.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you both to Saikawa Sensei and Mr. Phil Sutton. But at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Al Hodge to come back for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, and thank you, panelists. What great information, what great insight, and what great stories that you both have shared with us today. Georgia is very proud to be the home of Kubota USA and North America, and certainly very proud of Emory University and the roles, plural, that you, Dr. Saikawa, and others continue to play. We are grateful, and we also appreciate the fact that you're working across universities with the Georgia Research Alliance and with so many other partnerships. Governor Kemp has continued to reinforce the importance of the Georgia Research Alliance, and of course, environmental, agriculture, sustainability, all of that are among the areas that the Georgia Research Alliance works on, and including, again, biomedical research and the work that goes on at Emory and the other research universities. We're happy that throughout the state, Savannah, certainly with Savannah State University, Georgia Southern, Armstrong, the Port Authority that Phil Sutton was just referring to by extension, all of these factor into Georgia's role and leadership role. Number one in the country for economic development for all these years. We're very happy that Japan is our number one investor all these years, for many years, in fact. And we are also proud that there are companies that have sustainability and environmental interests that invest in Japan that are from Georgia, such as Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines, and they're continuing to do more R&D related to the environmental aspects and our future. We also, I feel compelled to give a shout out to people like Fred Taylor, a genius who continues to work with folks like Kubota, and then independently, he invented a recycling equipment that recycles tires all the way to carbon black. And it is not just carbon neutral, it's carbon friendly. And so shout out to the company called Green Carbon and Fred Taylor for what he's doing to make his difference in the world for environmental sustainability, hemp production, the new and different uses of hemp. I know during former governor, former Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, that was one of the fastest growing areas of R&D, the various uses of hemp, everything from the oils to uses in materials, and again, sustainability related to those opportunities. Well, again, on behalf of Japan American Society of Georgia and great folks that have shared in the past, like Bob Johnson, and our future folks like Jessica Cork from YKK, we genuinely appreciate everyone tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you again and for more informative sessions like these with the information shared and the tremendous insight that we enjoy today. Thank you, Yoshi Domoto, and to all of the folks that are members and participate. Please go to jasgeorgia.org because there's some additional upcoming events that we think you would be interested in learning about and participating in. Again, thank you. Domo arigato.